Susan,
Devin.
awesome little studio you have here.
Yeah, this is kind of crazy.
Showing the studio around. She invited me over to talk about her next journey in life, the photo check. What is this going to be, or what do you think it's going to be?
Well, it's kind of crazy. I mean, I've always loved to teach. I've taught a lot, but I never really wanted to jump into the game of competing with selling courses and all of this stuff. I don't know. I was running a busy portrait studio. I mean, I was a busy photographer. And, you know, you'll see somebody that's been doing photography for 2 years and now they're going to teach everyone else how to do it. I've been doing this for over 25 years. So I feel like after 25 years, I probably have just a little bit to say.
You know what that f-stop means.
Yeah. And I've played with stuff like this for a while. And I created a television show around some fine art stuff that I did, some flower images that I was doing. Mm-hmm. And so we were out in the field learning how to get in a lotus pond with leeches and snakes and film and make the sound go and all of that. And then about 4 or 5 months ago, it just came to me that I should be doing something on YouTube. And really the way it happened was this guy that I just love on YouTube has 750,000 followers. And I just love the way he presents and the way he talks. But at the end of one of his presentations, he said, sadly, I've never broken the code on how to actually sell my photography. And I thought, are you kidding me?
Yeah,
what the heck?
All those followers.
Right, all those followers, and nothing against him. Mm-hmm. He's built a business off being a YouTuber now, and that's fantastic. I have no problem with this, you know. But he's never actually sold photography.
So you want to reach out to the people who actually want to make a living with photography?
Well, I really want to. It's photography, the arts, and creative conversations. So I wanted the channel to be broad enough that we could talk about things other than photography, because I was in the music business for 20-something years. Mm-hmm. I paint. Mm-hmm. I have written not one, but 2 or 3 books. Right. And I love having conversations about any kind of creativity. So I didn't want to just pigeonhole it into photography, although the channel will be primarily photography driven, right, because that's what I've done for the last, 25 or 30 years. Right. And so it wasn't that I want to teach people to sell. It's not that I even want to teach people how to build a photography business. It's that I want people to understand that if that's something they want to do, they can.
Right. And
here's some ways to think outside of the box that you can do this, because I've been very fortunate to have made the kind of living that I've made as a photographer. I'm not an editorial photographer. I'm not in magazines. I'm not famous. I'm not a multimillionaire. But I have made a lot of money doing photography. It has provided me an incredible lifestyle.
And I know when I first met you, you were primarily doing portrait photography, and then a few years ago you branched out to the flowers, which is just absolutely gorgeous.
Well, thank you. Well, that was a huge jump for me.
Yeah. And then painting.
Yep, been painting.
And now this.
Right. So I wanted the conversations to be around what it takes to be a creative person. Mm-hmm. I mean, what it takes to take that to another level if you choose to take it to another level. So first and foremost, I want this channel to be for anyone who really loves photography or the arts, or just enjoys listening to somebody that talks about this and they're never going to do it themselves. Right. Exactly. It's going to be very broad. We'll talk about cameras. We'll talk about technique. I was laughing with you earlier and telling you I have never seen very many people on YouTube film photographing a 1-year-old.
Right.
And there's a reason for that. Well, sure. Because it's really hard.
W.C. Fields said something about that.
And what did he say? Do you remember?
Pets and children. The hardest thing to work with. I don't know.
Exactly. They'll.
A lot of people are going to know who he is, but
right. But so I was really excited about what I thought I could bring to the table. I just saw a little hole in the market. If there can be a hole in a platform that has how many millions of people broadcasting on it, I just thought it would be interesting to see where I could fill that hole. So in the last 6 months, we've been putting this together, and I wanted to come up with a name for the whole endeavor that would be cute and catchy so people could remember, because, my name is Susan Michael. This is my profession. This is all my professions, all my, Instagram and Facebook and all that is under Susan Michael. But I came up with the idea that the photo chick might be kind of cute.
I like it. And I literally just heard about it a few minutes ago. I
Right?
think it's great. I think it's
So, hence the sign, the photo chick. So, the idea was that we just wanted it to have a little fun thing that people can remember, that we can relate things back to. So, for example, you can be my peep, which I think is fun, Now, the main thing was the photochick.com was available as a website. Yeah, it was available.
That's actually surprising.
Which it's very surprising. Now, CHICK was $8,000. Nobody owns it. Maybe GoDaddy, maybe somebody, because they decided that was going to be a valuable name.
Right.
But CHIK happens to be a slang right now for cool and interesting. Cool as chick.
Yep.
And I thought, okay, I actually like the CHIK better than CHICK. So a lot of things will fall under the umbrella of the photo chick. And that is me. I mean, I've had kids run up to me in Sam's, "Hey, Mom, picture lady, picture lady. It's that lady that takes the pictures," because I've done a lot of little kids. And, of course, it's interesting because my mom would always say we would go to a big store like that, and she would go, "Can you go anywhere and not talk to a bunch of people or know a bunch of people?" I'm like, "No." Because in my area, I've been doing this a long time. I mean, the kids that I photographed as 1 and 2 year olds, years ago, are now getting married, doing I just did a high school senior where I did her baby pictures, I did her 6-year-old pictures, and I did her mom's wedding.
That's dream. You want that kind of work.
Well, that's the kind of work you do want. Yeah. And so, it means a lot to me that I have clients that want to come back and do that. And they frankly spend a lot of money. I mean, I'm not an inexpensive photographer. I'm not going to go to the beach and charge you $200 and hand you all of your files.
Absolutely.
So that's the conversation we want to have here around photography.
And with that, it's because we've been fighting as photographers the lowest common denominator, which
for years, always,
for years. And it's going to be a constant fight.
Yeah.
But people that want quality, that want knowledgeable photography and artistic photography, they're going to seek out people like you.
Another thing I want to highlight on the channel is just the pursuit of excellence. I mean, I think you can agree that since we've known each other, that there's always been a little degree of something extra about me. What is that? I push a little harder. Yes. I work a little harder, perhaps. Well, it does. It takes it. And, we had a great conversation not long ago with a friend sitting in that chair talking about, what it takes to actually make a living as a creative person. This person happened to be a musician. I was, again, a musician for many, many years, and made a living as a musician without a real job for 20-something years. In fact, I haven't had a real job since I was in high school.
You wouldn't want one.
Well, no. Who would want one? I mean, if you can avoid it, who would want one? I mean, who doesn't want to just live a life and make up your own rules and do whatever?
There's a whole side to that a lot of people don't realize.
There's a lot of responsibility.
You're everything.
You're everything. There's a lot of responsibility. I did a little YouTube the other day, and I think I said there were 5 things that every photographer needed to consider before they opened a photography business. Let's see if I can remember the 5. Okay, I know, right? 1 was you have to know how to hustle a gig.
Oh?
You have to learn how to live on a speculative income.
Which is very scary.
You have to be a people person.
Which a lot of photographers aren't because they're behind the camera.
Right. You have to not fight technology. You have to accept technology and embrace what it's going to bring to your business, because that has been a huge thing to changes insanity.
That's been a rolling stone in my lifetime. You bought a film camera and you had it for 10 years.
Right. Yeah. And the 5th one, I do remember them all because they're important. You have to love photography. You have to love what you're doing. I don't care if you're a musician, if you're a painter, whatever. If you're going to try to make a business endeavor out of a creative passion, you have to love what you're doing so much. But you have to realize that art form is about 10% of the equation. I mean, all of the other things, you can only do it so long unless you happen to be born in a rich family, or, you have a husband that's, working and making a ton of money, and you can just do whatever you want to do. And that's great if you can. But most people can't. So it's going to be a business. And making a business out of something you love is the greatest and one of the hardest things you'll ever do.
Well, the problem I've had is with it is if you have a hobby that you turn into a business, now it's not a hobby anymore. That's when you find out if you truly love it.
It's true.
Because you'll get tired of it. And the last thing I want to do today,
Right.
whatever that is.
Right. And I think people get bored. I mean, they think it's going to be something other than it is. I mean, it's a lot of hard work, and you deal with a lot of things like every other business deals with. But on the other hand, I want this channel to be for people who just love photography. I think there's going to be a lot of fun things. Like I love to talk about, for example, I have a bunch of fine art books laying over here, and I just love spending lots of money on very beautiful books, that will probably get thrown away when I die. But I love them. I love being inspired by other artists. And, a lot of people don't even know who these artists are or who these books are, but these people put all their heart and soul into doing this. And so I think it's fun to, showcase that kind of thing. I want to talk to writers. I've done a lot of writing. I think it's really interesting to talk to someone who, thinks enough about an idea to write a book about it. So I want this to be a place that I can talk about that. Hence the creative conversations. I just want the creative conversations to be around anything in the creative world, whether it's business or the actual art form or the newest camera that just came out.
Yeah. And the most of the stuff you see on the internet is gear centric.
Most of it.
Gear's awesome. I love gear, but there's a lot more to talk about.
Well, there's just a new light just came out. There's always a new light coming out, but it's a cute little light. It's very special. I have literally seen 25 to 30 YouTubers reviewing this light. It's insanity. It's like, it's all the same thing. I mean, yeah, everybody has their own take on it, and certainly they have their right to do that. But that's not what I want this channel to be.
Light companies sending these lights out.
Well, they are. Of course they are. Of course they are. And I'm not saying I wouldn't review stuff, but there's so much more. I mean, if every single thing you do is a review, and every 3 months you run out and you shoot something, listen, a little more shooting, a little less reviewing, right? A little more instruction, a little more thought process, a little more encouragement. How can you do this? Because I feel like if I did this, anyone could do it. And I think that I know that I have been fortunate that I live in the top percentage of photographers who have been able to make as good a living as I have doing what I've done. But I really do think anyone could learn to do that if they wanted to. The word intention comes into play here, because you have to be very intentional about it. Most people that are in a creative field kind of play at it rather than decide, I'm going to do this and let's do it. Much like starting this YouTube channel. I mean, I think friends of mine, family, they're shocked that I pulled this all together and we're like, okay, we're going to do this. Now here's how I'm going to do this, and here we go.
Did that happen to you back? Because I know of your music career, but I don't know a lot of details about it. Is that how you started? You just went for it?
With music?
Music, yeah.
I loved music like I never thought I would love anything as much as I loved music. I mean, I started playing piano when I was 5. I mean, I started singing in church choirs when I was a tiny, tiny little kid. I was the kid that would stand on the stage with my little white choir robe on, and everyone would be crying or sitting on the steps or picking their nose. And I would be the one standing in the middle, just smiling as big as I could, just singing as loud as I could possibly sing, till the point that people in the congregation would start giggling, and I didn't realize they were laughing at me. They're laughing with me. I remember Miss Alice Fields came up. I could draw a picture of it right now. I remember it so vividly. She was probably in her 70s, late 70s, 80s, and she used to be a florist, so she was very creative. Sweetest lady on earth. I must have been about 5 or 6. And she got down on her knees and she put her arms around me and she said, "My dear, do not let anyone ever hide your light. You have a light that shines so bright And I thought, what a profound thing to say to a child, you know? And so I played music all during high school, played for my high school choir, and then went to college. I was going to be a music major, got into 2.5 years of college, and quit to be in a band.
Of course.
Of course. Of course. You know, well, I had a friend. I went to high school with this friend, and his dad was managing a band, all Navy guys of all things. I was about, 19 years old maybe? And he came and he said, would you like to be in a band? And I'm like, how much does that pay? And I had a full-time job at this point.
Oh, boy.
And it paid like $200 more than I was making at this full-time job.
Usually said the way around.
No, it was like great. And he took care of everything. He protected me. All I had to do was go in there and sing. And that was my first job in a band. And I was in that band for 3 or 4 years. It just gave me an opportunity. He booked all the gigs. He kept everybody in line. He was the manager. Everybody got paid. There was no BS with this guy. It was unusual situation. And so at some point that somebody got transferred and it was decided that the band was no more. And it was time for me to move on. And I got in another band. And then it wasn't that long after that that I went to LA, and I lived out in LA for 12 or 15 years. And at some point during that, I picked up a camera, and I was going on tour, and I knew that a lot of musicians have a visual art. I had never found mine. Now, my sister can paint beautifully. She's always painted well. One of my sisters can draw very well. I was not great at drawing, can't draw a stick figure very well. And I was just kind of aware that I did not have any kind of a visual creative. And I saw a camera in a pawn shop. It was $100. Bought the camera, had no clue how to put a roll of film in it, got wherever we were going, got some film, started shooting. I mean, literally the very first roll that came out of the camera, not only did I know, but everybody knew. Anyone who looked at the images was like, oh, this is your thing. Yeah, so that's how I got into photography.
Wow, that's an amazing story. So, and you did that as a amateur, you just kind of
for 10 years I was traveling. I was playing music. I was out in LA a lot of that time. Of course, a lot of poor musicians and actresses and actors out there that need, headshots and stuff. We'd take our friends and go in the park and play and take pictures and all of that stuff. And that's really how I learned. And then I found a local college in LA. At the time, you could take a semester course for like $32 if you were a resident. And they had probably 16 or 18 photography courses. Of course, this was back in the day of film and all that stuff. And so I did every course they had and really just started learning. And then when I came back to Florida, after 12 or 15, I don't remember how many years I was in LA a while, I came back to Florida. And some very unusual things happened. I was still photographing, and a friend of mine that was singing in a band that I was in, her son was getting married. Typical, begged me to do the wedding. I'm like, no, I don't do weddings. And she's like, no, you come do the wedding. And I finally gave in, and I said, okay. Well, the bride happened to work at a big stock photography agency. Unbeknownst to me, I didn't even know what a stock photography agency was. They had moved to Jacksonville from New York.
Yes.
And she said, my editor would really like what you're doing, because I was doing kids in a vintage style, and this is 25, 30 years ago, sepia tone, and I would go in and I would hand color it with oils. So I was doing artwork to this way back then before I even started my photography business. And she said, I think that they would really like what you're doing. So I went in and talked to them, showed them some images. And they said, yeah, it would love to give you a contract. Can you come up with 13 images? Well, it didn't occur to me what they needed 13 images for. And I really didn't talk to him that much after that. I wasn't sure what to expect. I kind of just said, whatever, I'll do this and we'll see how it goes. Until one night, like probably, when do calendars come out? Like November?
Something like that.
Yeah, before Christmas, right?
You remember them
In the malls.
Yeah. So Mom and I are in Walmart, and I started like squealing, and I said, look here. my calendar of my children's work is on the end cap at Walmart, and I don't even have a photography business. And so I know it's crazy. I know, right? So that's how that night I looked at my mom and I said, I think it's time for me to start a photography business because I think you're right. And that is when I decided. I was in my late 30s at that point. I'd been playing music professionally since I was, 19, 20 years old. And I was tired of the bar scene. I mean, I'd been in L.A. I had done a lot of cool stuff in L.A. I mean, a lot of cool stuff happened in L.A., but I never got the big record deal, And so I just thought, this is going to give me the same lifestyle as music. It's my own business. It's creative. This is something I've been doing for 10 years for no money. Now I know I can, I can tell you the funny story about how I learned you could make money doing this. So I'm in LA singing, and it's in this huge hotel, and they have this big ballroom upstairs. And, you get bored. You're sitting there every night playing, right? So I'm going to go upstairs to the ballroom and see what's going on. Well, they're having some kind of celebrity fundraiser charity thing. And lo and behold, I see Donny Osmond sitting there. Now, Donny Osmond was my heart. I was going to marry Donny Osmond. I was sure I was going to marry Donny Osmond. And there he was, sitting with Weird Al Yankovic, of all people. And I was like, that's Donny Osmond. That's Donny Osmond, And so it was time for me to go back to work. So I came out and I was going to go down the stairs and I hear this, hey, stop. And it sounds like Donny Osmond. And I was like, I turned around. It was Donny Osmond. I turned around and I said, hi. And he's like, where are you going? And I said, I got to go back to work. And he goes, can you spare a few more minutes? And I'm like, I really should get back to work. He goes, well, this thing is pretty boring. He's like, do you by chance know that song Marie and I used to do in our show? And I'm like, you mean I'm a Little Country? He goes, yeah. And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, I know it. And he goes, would you jump up on stage and sing it with me? I'm like, are you kidding me? So I get up on stage and he looks at me. It's totally a cappella. And he goes, you have to start. I'm a little bit country. I was like, are you kidding me? I don't know what key, nothing. Next thing I know, Donnie's twirling me around on the stage. It was so surreal. Then it was over and I get off. Well, I saw a photographer that was taking pictures. So I walked over and I said, do you have a business card? And did you get any pictures of me and Donnie? He said, of course I did. And I said, can I buy some of them? Of course you can. So a few weeks later, I get with the guy and he charges me $75 a piece for 4 5x7s. There are photographers I know now that are not charging $75 a piece for their 5x7s. And I walked out of his house and I went, oh my God, you can make a living doing this. And so it wasn't long after that I came back to Florida and the whole thing happened with the calendar thing. And it's just a bunch of things coming together. I just knew, I felt like I could build a business doing this that would afford me the same lifestyle as music and I could do some of it while I still did music. And I did for the first couple years.
Sure. That makes sense. You slowly transition into the next field.
Right. So 20 years of hustling a gig as a musician, 30-something years hustling a gig I'm telling you my age, but 30-something years hustling gigs as a photographer. And I've never really shared a lot of how I do what I do. And so there's a lot that you learn in 40-something years of being an artist for a living that I think other people could benefit from hearing about.
Right. And because your photographies and the organizations that you got involved in with photography, because there's some wonderful organizations that I am sometimes surprised photographers aren't a member of.
Like Professional Photographers of America.
Yeah. And you ended up being president of that for a while.
I'm pretty sure I was the 5th woman president in 134 years. Now, they quickly changed that after me. So there's been 4 or 5 more women presidents. But in 135 years, there's only been, at this point, 10 maybe, if that, female presidents. And of course, back in the day, it was a predominantly male industry. Yeah, back in the 60s and 70s, it was a predominantly male industry. But in the 80s and 90s, it did a complete 180 and became more of a female-dominated industry, and thankfully, you know, they realized that they needed to have more females involved, and I was one of the first women president. You know, there were 3 or 4 ahead of me that did an amazing job, and being in that organization and being, you know, such an integral part of that organization and learning how basically it's a $10 million a year business. I mean, learning, being in charge of that and learning how that works. And, you know, there's a staff of 40 up in Atlanta, and it's just growing. It grew. This is the incredible thing about photography. I got on the board, and you're on the board about 9 years if you go up to the president seat. So you're 4 or 5 years as a director, and then you get voted up to go to the executive board, and then it's another 4 positions before you get into 3 positions before you get into president, and then you go to chairman of the board. When I joined the board, there were 12,000 members. When I left, there were almost 35,000.
My goodness.
So just in that short amount of time. So what happened in that amount of time? What changed all of that? Digital photography. Yeah, so a lot of digital photography, a lot of photographers really were not happy about it coming.
Oh, I remember.
It was a tough transition. I mean, we thought it would take 5 or 6 years. It took 2 years. So I remember standing at my studio, and my friend that was, you know, kind of the leader of the digital thing around here said, you have to buy a digital camera. If you don't, you're going to be left behind. And there were so many amazing photographers that did not make that transition just because of the technical aspect. It was difficult, and nobody knew what they were doing. The labs didn't know what they were doing. We didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know anything about color balancing or Photoshop. I remember the first time I learned how to clone something in Photoshop, I thought I had really done something. And we literally would get together at one photographer's studio, and we would all learn how to crop and make something black and white. I mean, the very rudimentary things in Photoshop.
That's something else that the organizations like PPA and the local organizations, a lot of photographers think that it's an adversarial industry.
It's crazy.
It's
I mean, artists by nature are just not confident in themselves, and they somehow that comes out in some sort of competition. It's like you're competing with people, and you know, you don't take my business, that's my business. I've had people tell me, that's my job. How dare you even think that you're going to take that job? You know, and we all have taken jobs from somebody else. I get a wedding you don't get.
Sure.
You know, somebody comes to me for a family. I've had people that have come to me that go to somebody else, you know. I mean, but I have people who come to me that say they will never go anywhere else, and I know they've never been anywhere else. I've been photographing their kids for 20 years, you know. So, I mean, it all works out in the end. I mean, I think the thing that has kept me going all these years is my enthusiasm for what I do. Do you ever really see me sit down at a table and tell you how horrible my clients are and how much I hate those? No, because I wouldn't even allow an employee to speak bad about a client. I would tell them, look, don't talk bad about our clients. They come here and they pay your salary and they pay my salary. If you don't like them, then you're the one that needs to go. Because you're always going to deal with problems with clients. But by and large, I have been incredibly lucky that I've never dealt with many problems because basically I do what I need to be doing. I've had very few people upset with me over the years because I don't not get them their stuff. If there's something wrong, which is rare, I fix it. It's my responsibility to fix it. I'm not going to say, oh, the lab did that. I'm going to take responsibility. I'm the owner of the business.
You also have a good sense of how to handle told me one time about a guy who was saying, like, how come this picture's this much money and you've got to basically it's almost like a photography heckler. You get
right.
a good way of dealing with.
And I said, wow. I said, well, you know what? Here's the truth. Only you can know the value of your work. I had a young photographer. We were having a local chapter board meeting here. And I had started doing some dance schools, which I do a lot of dancers. I love photographing dancers. It comes from my musicality. I just like, you know. And over the years, I amassed a little number of dance schools that I did. And actually, if you do the math, the money is pretty dang good. And he looked at me and he goes, that's just so beneath you. I can't believe you would do something like that. Well, I had just bought this kind of monstrous house and had a monstrous mortgage to go with it. And I looked at him and I said, yeah, well, the difference between you and me is I want to pay my mortgage. And I said, I don't think it's beneath me. I actually, when I first started doing the dance schools, I had a client who had a daughter that had Down syndrome. And she had never been able to find it. She was 4, and she had never had a photographer who really could work with her and get a gorgeous portrait. And this client, right. And so this client, unbeknownst to me, owned this really big, fairly affluent dance school. And her mom and her owned it together. And her mom called me and she goes, would you ever consider photographing our dance school? Now, this was right about 2004, right when we were kind of really getting knee deep into the whole digital thing. And I said, I have 2 things I'm going to tell you. I said, first, I have to shoot it digitally, and you have to understand none of us know what we're doing. Will have to figure this out, but there's no way I'm doing this on film. I said, second, I will not deal with a dance mom. I said, you have to know, and this is the kind of conversation I had with her before I took the job. You have to know that I've got your back. I'm going to do everything to make everyone as happy as I can. I am not going to deal with ridiculousness, and I'm going to refer them to you. And she said, fine, I got your back. And she never let one person, you're dealing with 150, 200 people that you don't know, that don't know you. And it just changes the dynamics. If somebody wants to be weird, and people can be weird and unreasonable. I just can't deal with unreasonable. So she took, and that's how I learned to photograph dance schools. And that was, a big volume job where you're photographing, kid after kid, day on day. So I started accumulating dance schools, and now that actually is a sizable amount of income for me. But this young guy thought it was beneath me, and of course he's out of business, been out of business, and left the business disgraced because he ran out on a bunch of brides and never gave them what the law was after him, and all. That's the thing I don't understand about photographers. First off, okay, here we go. If you're gonna do a wedding, know what you're doing. Weddings are not a place to learn photography. Now, when I did that wedding for my friend, I had been photographing for 10 years, and I had enough photography classes at a college under my belt to have gotten a fine art degree if I'd ever cared about getting one. That was before I ever did that. I'm not saying you have to take that long. I'm saying a wedding, in my opinion, is the most important, most difficult job you will ever do. There is no do-over.
Right.
You're dealing with people that are at the height of emotion. You're dealing usually with divorced families where you're the psychologist. There was a long list. Sometime I'm going to find it. Some photographer wrote this list of everything you are at a wedding. You're a nurse. You're a mental health person. You're a psychologist. You're a cruise director. There's a million things that you are at a wedding. And to me, it's one of the hardest things you're ever going to do. So I don't know why people decide that that's where they need to start when they're as a photographer. But I never could understand photographers who would take on that responsibility and then run out on a bride. And inevitably,
they just went to Walmart. Oh, let's get some pictures made, Sally.
Right. So nowadays it's even easier for that to happen. Why? Because you meet up in Starbucks. Okay, they don't have a business. They don't have anywhere for you to meet them appropriately. Anyone can have a website now.
Sure.
They have a cell phone. All you have to do is turn the cell phone off. You don't know where they live. You're never going to find them again. They're just gone. They're like, poof, gone. And so, brides need to know better and photographers need to know better. Have some damn integrity about what you're doing. And how many of you know? I can name 10 or 12 just in this town who have ran out on brides, left them high and dry, no images, no nothing, and it's crazy.
I used to videotape a lot of weddings back in the day. I still have the master tapes. I don't have a machine to play them on.
Right.
I have those tapes. No one's ever called me.
Right. Okay. So I have, give or take, I have most negatives I ever shot. I'm not telling you I can find them, but they are fairly organized, So I have most negatives I ever shot. I have most anything I shot digitally on a CD somewhere.
Anybody I know.
Well, yeah, I have a lot of hard drive space. Well, and frankly, going to digital made me crazy. Once DVDs and CDs were no longer relevant, it made me crazy because I hate the thought that everything is digital, like it's electronic, not digital, electronic. One little thing and it's gone. And so I really mourn the situation where I could burn CDs, and it sounds old, but then I've got CDs that I've pulled from 20 years ago that work. You know, now you don't even have CD burners anymore or DVD burners.
Equipment to play them.
Exactly. And I try to keep it at the studio because, knock on wood, I have never had a CD at the studio or a DVD that I couldn't open. Yeah. And it will come to a time when that won't happen.
I've had one SD card fail on me and during a shoot, and I've had a friend of mine had a card, CF card.
Very few times.
I was able to get the information off of that.
Here's the funny thing about that. The first CF card I bought was 1 gigabyte, and it was $984. And guess what? The files in the camera were so small you could shoot 3 weddings on it if you wanted to. I mean, imagine. Now I'm shooting a 50 megapixel camera that, you know.
What was your first camera? Your first digital camera? What was it?
Was the Canon D30. And it shot about a 3.4 megapixel file. I mean, it was, but here's the thing. I still have an image in my studio that I shot off of that camera. It was the 7th or 8th wedding that I had the digital camera for. And I was just using it for like black and white or kind of getting used to it. And I shot this image of this bride and groom coming out of after the ceremony, and it was outside and it was beautiful. And she was smiling and laughing, and her mouth is white. We call her Big Mouth Bride. And she was the most beautiful girl, and her husband just had this beautiful, it was very candid. Right. And that was always,
that's my favorite.
Yeah, that was always my thing at a wedding. I'm a very loose shooter. So catching a moment is always been my specialty at weddings, and we'll do all the other stuff too. But catching that moment was the most important thing. Here it was on that digital camera, that tiny little file. We blew it up to like a 20 by 20 print. And to this day, I'll put it up against anything else at the studio. It still looks great.
And you shot 35 before that? Were you shooting medium format?
I was shooting 35 when I got into professional photography. But I was quickly told by all the professionals that I would be laughed out of the game if I didn't learn how to shoot medium format. So, of course, I went and I bought myself all this expensive medium format equipment, and I learned how to shoot medium format. And I also learned how to shoot in the studio because I felt like if you were going to be a serious photographer, you needed to learn how to shoot in the studio. I'm not saying everyone needs to do that, but what I'm saying is this. Now, today, all these years later, boy, that is something to know how to do. It's not many people know how to do it. So I can go and do all these beautiful portraits in my studio, sitting on a chair in the air conditioning. You know, go run yourself out to a park somewhere and get in line to shoot in front of an old truck, you know. And I'm very fortunate that I have bought the beautiful studio that I bought. I bought it for the land. I have 2 acres of land that, you know, it's a dream for a
photography park is what you
I bought a photography park.
Yep.
I did. And it's served me incredibly well over the years.
So pre-COVID, you and I did a little bit of work together on you were diving into video. You had this wonderful idea for a show about people who grow flowers, where all they come from, and exotic, I guess you could call it exotic locations.
Right.
And I've seen some of the footage and it looks amazing. You did a great job with that. But that kind of got you into the whole video thing.
It did.
And as of course now our still cameras are also video cameras. And our
right.
phones are video cameras and our phones are everything. So is that so it's kind of slipped into this idea for the podcast? You're sort of taking it to the next level?
Okay, so about 6 years ago, I had a friend of mine who has been incredibly successful in photography. I'm talking millions and millions and millions of dollars. Say to me, you really could be doing so much more. Even though I had, I've done a lot, but you could be doing so much more. And we talked about it, and he said, you really need to come up with something personal that you can build a brand where you can, sell many things to many people rather than, you're making good money, but you're never going to make a ton of money as a portrait photographer. Right.
Calendar and Walmart.
Right. And I really had never thought about it. I mean, I loved being a portrait photographer. I still love I will always be a portrait photographer, but he really got me thinking. So I, one cold kind of fall winter night, had some flowers at my studio, and I decided that I would take them out into the actual studio rather than do something outside. And I hung these tulips upside down over this piece of PVC pipe. and I photographed them, and the image was pretty beautiful. It was spectacular. I mean, I fell in love with it, and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool. So I didn't really tell a whole lot of people. I just started spending a lot of time at the studio by myself at night with the music blaring, photographing flowers. And the big game with the whole flower thing was finding the flowers. Because, of course, you want cool flowers, and it's November, so you're going to Whole Foods or Trader Joe's or wherever you can go to see if you can find cool flowers. And then you want more cool flowers, and then all of a sudden the word got out a little bit, and I had, spring rolls around, and I have, friends whose moms have these beautiful gardens, and all of a sudden I'll come to the studio, and there'll be a little basket full or a cup full of flowers sitting there for me. And so I was just really intrigued by photographing these flowers. And it's really something I had never been as captivated by anything as I was the flowers. I don't know if it was just because it was a new creative outlet for me, but it was something that I spent a whole lot of time doing. And then, of course, I had done so many. I met up with somebody that said they were a book publisher and I should do a book. And of course I should do a book. And I, had it in my mind, okay, we're going to do a book. And he kept pushing me, do more. And then I found out he really just wanted $75,000 from me. And I was like, oh, okay, you're not actually a book publisher. You're like a book broker or something. And I knew there was something fishy. You can kind of trust your intuition on stuff like that. And at that point, I had to decide whether or not, I wanted to give up the idea of doing a book because I had plenty of work to put the book together. And of course, I've designed wedding albums for 20 years. I knew how to sit down and design a book. So I did. And then I just started shopping printers, and turns out a year later, I published my own book, and it was this beautiful fine art book. And that was a stepping stone. I mean, that was definitely a foray into a much higher level than I had expected at that point. By now I'm putting lots of time and money and effort into this whole thing. And you need to grow this thing. You need to grow this brand. I mean, I feel like people buy art from people that they know, or that they're buying into an idea as much as they're buying a piece of art. And so I understood that it was going to take this marketing effort to do this. I did not realize it was going to be as humongous as it has been, but it has been far beyond, exceeded anything I could have imagined. And so I was driving up to Atlanta, and I saw these beautiful pile of wisteria on the road. I just love when it hangs all lush and full on the road. You know what it looks like in the South when the wisteria comes. So I decided to stop and take some images of some of this wisteria. And as luck would have it, I parked in a church parking lot. And it was just the most bizarre experience. People had been saying, oh, we need a TV show. Well, everybody needs a TV show, right? That's all anybody thinks about anymore.
15 minutes of fame.
Yeah, whatever. And I'm like, well, what would that show be? And as I stood in that parking lot, it occurred to me that the story behind the flowers was actually finding the flowers. Okay. And as it went through my mind, I thought, I actually looked up and said, you got to be kidding me. But the idea was there. As a musician, as an artist, I can emphatically say one thing. When an idea comes to you, pay attention. Because these are God-given. I do absolutely believe that they are fleeting moments of creativity, that you are gifted, and if you ignore them, they will go away. So if I've learned nothing else in 40 years, I've learned to pay attention to that nagging little voice in my head that won't go away. And that's what was happening with this idea about what this show would be. I don't even know, can you call it TV anymore? I mean, if you get a record deal, is it really a record deal anymore? There's no records. Yeah. There's hardly any TV. I don't know.
Actually, there are records again.
Well, they're coming back, But I don't even know if that makes sense, right? So I literally got in my car, went to the next exit, pulled off, and I will never forget, because God and I were having this little back and forth. And I said, okay, this is nuts. If I'm supposed to do this, I am going to pull over, and I am going to jump on GoDaddy, and I'm going to see if there's a .com that makes any sense. Right. Because the first thing you need is a title, a show title. Mm-hmm. And everything's taken. So what's that going to be? I was sitting between a Dairy Queen and a Ford dealership. Okay. And I pulled out the computer, and And within 30 seconds, the Flower Life came up. I could not believe the flowerlife.com was available for $11.99. I mean, there's Salt Life, there's Beach Life.
Sure.
Why doesn't somebody own Flower Life? Now I own Flower Life. And I was like, oh my God. I drove the rest of the way to Atlanta going, this is insane. So what do? I decide we're going to go shoot this television show. I had no clue how to do it or what to do. I knew enough about video to, touch the tip of my finger, but I know about sound. And I thought, you know what? I had found a lotus grower up in the North Georgia mountains, and her place was just magical. And I called her and I said, I got this crazy idea. Can I just come be there for 5 days with no pressure? Let us just run around and let us just kind of tell the story of what you do. And she said, sure. So I got a couple of photographer friends. I got my niece and her husband. Her husband happened to have a drone he could fly. And we went up there and spent 5 days and did all of this stuff. I was literally walking in lotus ponds with leeches and snakes on me. And so now I'm the producer, the director, for the most part, the sound person. I mean, I'm in charge. This is my deal. None of us really knew what we were doing. So, but considering all of that, we pulled it off. So we come home with all this massive amount of video. Now what, right? So you do what any artist is going to do. You kind of sit there and think about it and cry a little bit and go, oh my God, I'm completely overwhelmed by what I had done. And
It's a mountain.
It's a mountain. It is a very big old mountain. And I didn't know how to work in Premiere Pro or I didn't know how to do any of the editing software. Of course, I couldn't afford to pay somebody $100 an hour to come in and do this with me. How was this going to work? So I did find a young man that was reasonable. And I said, look, I need some help with this. He had just gotten out of school. And I said, I need to figure this out. Will you come over and just let me pay you to sit here with me? And the only deal is you have to teach me how to do this as we do this. And so we worked on it for months.
Right.
And you wonder, do you have a story? You don't know. And you know what? When I worry about that and I think about that now, I think about listening to other directors, big directors. I mean, like big names. That say, I didn't know if I had a story, even when we closed shooting with big,
It's the same process.
Right. And look at the millions of dollars that have been spent on films that turned out to be nothing. I mean, they're bust, Yep. And so I in my head, I knew what we had and I thought we had a story, but I wasn't sure how we would put it together and make it a story. Well, long story short, we ended up getting connected with a big name production company. And I had an opportunity to pitch it to somebody. So we got in there and we got a 10, 15-minute segment done, and it was my opportunity to pitch. Well, of course, it was in the middle of COVID. Things were crazy. And it didn't go anywhere, although I will say that it was a really big production company.
Right.
I had never pitched anything. I know how to talk. I know how to sell. They were interested, but the timing was off. Everybody was crazy during COVID. So, I kind of let it go a little bit, sadly, because it was so overwhelming to me. Plus, I was worried about COVID. I mean, I run a small business. Who wasn't worried about COVID?
How long?
Nobody knew. It was crazy, So the one thing I knew how to do was continue to tell more stories. So over the next couple years, every opportunity I got, I would go and I would find somebody interesting and we would video this or put the thing together and tell the story. Till I went to Alaska 6 or 8 months ago, and we did a story on peonies in Alaska, which is an amazing story because the stories to me are amazing. They're more human interest than they are about flowers. They just happen to be about flowers. They're more human interest. And now I realize that we've done, me, myself, and I, have done so much that I have enough to probably sell a whole season to somebody.
That's great.
And it's sitting in the can ready to go, and it's a beautiful story. Well, will I ever figure it out? I don't know. I don't know what. I think that's part of being an artist, and that's part of why I wanted to do this YouTube channel, is that I think part of being an artist is not knowing and letting it go and just do the work, and see if it all comes together. And if that doesn't come together the way I want it to come together, because in my head, that comes together to support the fact that I've done all this photography work that I want to be a fine art line. Now you've got a television show that supports that. Well, that would be great publicity, wouldn't it? Sure. And so that was the idea behind doing the show. Well, we didn't just talk about doing the show. We did the show. The show is beautiful. And so during all of that going on, in the back of my head, I fought social media really hard. I've not felt at home on Instagram or Facebook. It's this very slippery slope. And especially if you're wanting to do it in a way that will be effective in any major way. I kept having this idea in the back of my mind that perhaps YouTube would be a way to go. But just the thought of tackling another huge endeavor was really difficult for me. And I fought it for quite some time. I was like, I just can't do this. You know, I never wanted to create courses. I never wanted to, I love to teach, but I couldn't figure out an outlet that made sense for me to teach. And I think clearly we've discussed that after 40 years in this business, certainly I have plenty to say that would be helpful to someone else coming into this. And one night I just realized that's what you need to be doing. And I realized that this was the one platform that made sense to me. It was the one platform I could build into something substantial. You know, it beats the heck out of putting an image on Instagram.
YouTube's it's a very unusual entity, and it's amazing how because I would hear years ago that people would have YouTube videos. I actually, as a viewer, kind of go there for a while.
Exactly.
Might be my age or whatever, but a young man told me one time, a fellow photographer told me, oh yeah, there's they'll pay you to do. You get to a point where they start paying you money, and it just didn't
make sense.
Click and
right.
And it was most of it was kind of silly stuff back then, but it started growing, and it's an amazing service, amazing venue for people.
It is.
There's been really nothing like it.
It gives everybody a voice.
Yeah.
Now, the saddest voice, not on YouTube, are from people in our age group.
Right.
Because most people that are 50 or older are not going to have the technical skills to build a YouTube channel.
You see a few.
There's a few. But by and large, we're like 8% of the whole thing, if there's that even. Very few. The thing is that someone who's been in business for 40 years has a lot to teach somebody if they want to learn something. And why would the people with all of this experience not be the people out there teaching it? Now I love Mr. Beast. I want to meet Jimmy. I love Mr. Beast. I would almost go work for him. Now, here's the thing. Just because I find him fascinating. But see, that's why I love doing this kind of thing. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's photography or music or painting or whatever, is that I am just fascinated by what this young man has been able to do. Most people in our age group don't even know who Mr. Beast is. They have no clue. Right. So once I latched onto the idea, it scared me a lot. And I thought, okay, because I realistically knew what an endeavor it was going to be. But then I thought, you know what? You have got all the skill set. You've been on film a lot. You've been in music. You understand it's got to be fun. It's got to be somewhat entertaining. It's got to be educational. It's got to bring value to people. Mostly, it's got to be authentic. I think it's got to be authentic. I'm not perfect. I am not 20. And I'm not,
that's the whole point.
That's the whole thing.
People are not perfect.
Well, right. And frankly, being able to edit this stuff and look at your own face.
I say this. In the 5 years I've really been an active YouTube viewer, I have seen, and coming from a background in broadcast production and in-house training and stuff like that, I've seen the level of professionalism in editing and grow
tremendously.
YouTube, and that's good, but it's not absolutely necessary. I mean, you can somebody can start off with their phone.
Absolutely, they could. If they have a message, they could.
The message is the key thing.
It is. And so, my question was, do I have what it takes to make this work, not only from a viewership standpoint, but also from my own ability to buy into a project this big on the level that I know it has to be approached. I never approach anything haphazardly or part the way. I jump in with both feet.
Warping.
Yes, because, and because I think, again, I think we may have discussed that I believe that the biggest mistake photographers can make if they actually want to make a living, or are an artist of any kind in any medium, is kind of doing it.
Yes.
You have to intentionally go, all right, this is something I'm going to do. I'm jumping in. I'm going to figure this out, which is exactly how this whole thing got started. And I did a lot of research. I paid some money for some expensive courses. I've read a ton of books. I have spent hours and hours, just coming up with what I think this would be.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of the day, I just want it to be a fun, educational place for people who love photography and anything in the arts to come hang out and learn about being a creative person in the business world.
I think that's a great idea. I'm excited about seeing it grow, quite frankly.
Well, and I'm really excited about it too. And so I wanted to do this one today that we're doing. And thank you for coming and doing this, because I felt like I needed something that would explain why I wanted to do this, who I was, what my intention was for doing this, and just kind of as an introduction to the audience that may come here. And I couldn't think of anyone more appropriate than you.
That's high praise. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that.
So thanks for being here.
Yep.
And I want to invite anyone who is interested in photography to come and join me here. I think there's going to be a lot of really fun conversations, and my intention is to make it very broad-based so that a lot of people can find a home here.
Yes, the photo chick.
The photo chick, yeah.
Subscribe.
The photo chick, subscribe. Do the thing. Do the thing.
Subscribe somewhere, wherever